at 06 EU0 or 600 hours. The first rays of daylight pushed across the tarmac at Laughlin Air Force Base in southwest Texas. The base stirred to life with the hum of engines, boots on gravel, and the sharp rhythm of early morning cadence. At the main security gate, First Lieutenant Lena Myles stood straight-backed in the guard station, her uniform crisp, name tape aligned, cover square. She didn't move unless she had to. Her eyes scanned every ID, every badge, every detail, and she spoke only when protocol required. To most on base, she was background noise, the quiet woman checking IDs, the gate girl. They said it like a punchline. Captain Sean Daltrey rolled up in a government-issued Ford Explorer, window down, elbow propped like he owned the road. His mirrored sunglasses reflected Lena's still expression as she extended her hand. He took his time fishing out his CAC, then flicked it toward her with two fingers like tossing a napkin. She caught it midair, said nothing. Daltrey leaned over the wheel and smirked. Heard the Thunderbolt Princess got grounded. Now she's playing bouncer. Behind him, Lieutenant Michelle Rain let out a dry laugh that didn't match her rank or restraint. Lena didn't react. Her thumb scanned the ID, verified the barcode, and returned it without a word. Daltrey didn't move right away. He glanced at Rain, then back at Lena. You even talk anymore? Or did the gate finish rewiring your brain? Lena held eye contact for precisely 1 second longer than necessary. No more. She nodded once and stepped back, cleared them through. No extra words, no visible flinch. When the Explorer rolled past, Daltrey said something Lena didn't catch, but the rear view burst into chuckles. She returned to center stance, feet shoulder-width apart, eyes ahead. The next vehicle approached. Same drill. By 07:15 or 7:15 a.m., the base had settled into its weekday rhythm. Flight students moved between simulators and classrooms. Instructors barked at slow responses. Maintenance teams worked the line near the T-6s. And through it all, Lena stayed at her post. Her only companion was the static buzz from the radio, clipped to her vest. 3 hours in, a young airman approached with a coffee in hand, not for Lena. He gave it to the tech sergeant just behind her, laughed about something Lena couldn't hear, then turned to her. Nice job holding that gate. Ma'am, keep it up. He winked and walked off before she could respond. Not that she would have. The mockery wasn't cruel. It wasn't even loud. It was the slow erosion of presence. She'd been assigned to the gate without explanation 3 weeks ago. No memo, no reprimand, just orders. And she followed them, like she always had. Every movement she made was regulation tight, no wasted steps. Her sidearm sat perfectly centered in its holster, retention strap secured, gloves always on, boots always clean, even after standing in gravel for hours. No one ever said she wasn't professional. They just said it like it was a punchline. Behind the smirks and whispers, nobody asked where she came from. Nobody cared that she once flew A-10s over Kandahar. Nobody noticed the scar along her jawline or the way she tracked everything vehicles, foot traffic, camera angles with eyes that never stopped moving. By noon, the sun had risen high enough to turn the guard booth into a glass oven. Sweat trickled down Lena's spine, but her face remained unreadable. She refused the shade, refused to sit. Each time someone passed without looking at her, she logged the interaction in her mind. She wasn't counting insults, she was cataloging patterns. At 14:30 or 2:30 p.m., a Humvee idled at the checkpoint longer than usual. Its driver stared at her while chewing on a protein bar, said nothing, and then drove through once cleared. She noticed the vehicle had taken a different route the previous day. Slight deviation, probably nothing. Still, she logged it. Later that afternoon, 2 civilian contractors exited a service van, both scanning badges absent-mindedly. One forgot his until she asked. His partner chuckled. Guess she's not just a mannequin. Lena held his gaze for exactly 1 second, checked the ID, cleared them through. Behind her, someone muttered gate robot. The phrase bounced off her like static. As the last shift change approached, A pair of second lieutenants passed by with golf bags slung over their shoulders. They didn't salute, didn't even slow down. One of them threw a hand over his shoulder and said, "Don't fall asleep out here. Heat's good for you." Lena said nothing, just noted the time. At 18 sharp, or 6 p.m. Her relief arrived, yawning before his boots hit the ground. He greeted her like a real person. She nodded, handed over the gate tablet, and disappeared without a word. Back to her quarters. Same room, same layout, same silence. No one saw the encrypted phone tucked inside her drawer. No one saw her handwritten logs, or the ciphered notes under lock and biometric scan. They only saw a woman in uniform standing perfectly still in the Texas sun. And by design, that's all they were supposed to see. By 05:45 or 5:45 a.m., First Lieutenant Lena Myles was already in uniform, boots laced and patrol cap squared. Her quarters were silent, the kind of silent that settled into corners like dust. She moved with the quiet rhythm of routine, checking the small mirror by the door. Hair tight, name tape aligned, everything exactly where it belonged. At 06:00 or 6 o'clock sharp, she arrived at the main gate and relieved the night shift. No small talk, just a nod and a transfer of the gate log tablet. She logged in, checked the perimeter cameras, and reset the scanner for ID cards. The routine never changed, and neither did her posture, standing at attention without being told. Not because anyone was watching, but because it mattered to her. Most days passed in a kind of blur. Vehicles rolled through at steady intervals. Officers, enlisted, contractors, civilians. Some offered a half-hearted nod. Others didn't even glance up. The ones who smirked when they passed didn't register anymore. Their disrespect wasn't new. It was part of the noise. She tracked every detail anyway, not out of paranoia, but out of habit. Vehicle type, deviation from schedule, slight changes in badge format, everything filed mentally. No one noticed. She didn't expect them to. Around 10:10 or 10 after 10 a.m., a white box truck pulled into the inbound lane. A civilian driver leaned out, squinting through sunglasses. "Morning. Lieutenant, here's the manifest." He passed her the documents without a smirk or tone. His voice was just normal. She scanned his badge and cleared him. When she handed it back, he paused. "Thank you. Ma'am, appreciate what you do out here." Lena looked at him for a second longer than usual. Not out of suspicion, just surprise. It had been days since anyone addressed her like that. She nodded once. "You're good to go." He smiled, put the truck into gear, and drove through. The moment passed, but something about it stayed with her. By 13:00 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the checkpoint was in full flow again. Lena remained perfectly still, shifting her weight only when needed. The sun beat down, and sweat soaked through the back of her undershirt, but her blouse remained flawless. She used the brief lulls to clean smudges from the plexiglass, to tighten cable slack around the security monitors, to keep her space as sharp as her posture. No one noticed the way she always faced the inbound lanes at a slight angle. It gave her a better line of sight to the left shoulder, where the shadow of blind spots in camera coverage slipped through. She watched that corner more than any other. By 18:00 or 6 p.m., her relief arrived again. Another quiet exchange, another crisp nod. Lena walked back to her quarters without removing her cap until the door closed behind her. The room was exactly as she had left it. Bed made tight, sheets flat, locker closed, sidearm secured in a locked drawer. The only thing out of place was a black notebook on her desk. She sat down, opened it, and began writing in small, clean handwriting. Not English, not code. Something layered in encryption, symbols and shorthand that only a few people in the country would recognize. She logged the truck's license plate, the base commander's late departure, the exact phrasing of a passing joke made near the North Tower. When the journal entry was complete, she locked the book in a biometric container under her bed. From the same compartment, she retrieved a phone with no markings. It hummed softly as she activated it. No number. Just a black screen. She pressed the single call icon. A voice answered after one ring. Status. Observation ongoing. Base pattern holding. 91% of expected behaviors confirmed. Minor deviation logged. Timeline intact. Understood. Hold position. Next phase TBD. Copy. The call ended. She powered the device down and placed it back in the compartment. Outside, the base lights buzzed to life against the dusk. Inside, Lena Myles stood by the window, arms crossed behind her back, still in uniform, still watching. At 14:32 or 2:32 p.m., the humidity had begun to rise, and a brief mid-afternoon shower had left the inbound lane slick with standing water. A shallow trench near the checkpoint hadn't drained properly. Lena had noted it 4 days ago. She had also noted that the facility's request to fix it had been marked low priority. It was now a puddle the size of a manhole cover, dark and wide and waiting. From 100 meters out, she saw the olive-drab Jeep Wrangler cutting through the access lane too fast for wet ground. She didn't flinch, didn't shift. Her boots stayed firmly in regulation position, shoulder width apart, toes slightly angled. She could see the driver well before the vehicle reached her post. Captain Sean Daltrey wasn't smiling. Not yet. His hand rested casually on the steering wheel as the Jeep veered slightly to the right. The front tire dipped into the puddle. The water launched in a fan of brown arcs across her lower half. It struck her uniform with a wet slap, streaking mud from her knees to her ribs. Daltrey rolled past without stopping. In the rear view, she saw his smirk. A passenger in the front seat laughed hard enough to slap the dashboard. Lena didn't speak. She didn't turn. She scanned the next ID card with one hand while water slid off her pant leg in thick drops. Her voice stayed level, her tone unchanged. At 14:40 or 2:40 p.m., the gate camera feed should have logged the incident. It did not. The external lens had been dirty since last week's dust storm. Maintenance hadn't responded. The angle from the interior monitor barely caught the edge of the splash. No one from base security called to report. No one dispatched a patrol for misconduct or checked on the status of the posted officer. A corporal across the lot glanced over and turned away. Lena didn't expect backup. She filed it all away without reaction. Her shift ended at 18:00. She stood there for 3 hours with boots soaked and blouse stained, checking IDs with the same mechanical precision as always. Her voice never cracked. Her hands never trembled. At 18:15 or 15 minutes past 6 p.m., she entered the women's restroom near the administrative wing. No one else was inside. She stepped into the far stall, removed her blouse, and hung it over the door. The mud had dried in uneven swirls. She took a small digital camera from her pocket, snapped 3 photos from precise angles, and uploaded the files to her encrypted device. She rolled her sleeves up and began cleaning the uniform with methodical care. Wet paper towels, cold water, blotting, not scrubbing. She worked in silence for nearly 20 minutes. Her breathing never changed. Afterward, she studied the uniform in the mirror. It was no longer inspection ready, but close. Close enough to avoid further attention. She dried her hands, secured the camera in a padded pouch, and left without looking back. Back in her quarters, the routine resumed. Boots off, tablet unlocked, entry opened. She didn't write about the puddle. She wrote about the inaction, the failure of the external camera, the lack of support response, the casual laughter. She logged each failure with a numbered tag and timestamp. She color-coded it as a cultural red flag and flagged the camera for secondary review. At 20:40 or 8:40 p.m., her encrypted phone buzzed once. Assessment. She typed the response in seconds. Behavior pattern confirmed. Target personnel consistent. Incident logged. Standing by for further tasking. She placed the phone back into its cradle and returned the blouse to its hanger, perfectly aligned beside its twin. Outside, the wind carried the scent of dust and jet fuel. Inside, she sat perfectly still and stared at the corner of the room where the wall met the floor, not thinking, just tracking. There was no anger, no need. Data had been collected, and that was all that mattered. At 16:05 or 5 minutes past 4 p.m., the black convoy came rolling down the access road without warning. 3 suburban SUVs, matte paint, no markings. Their windows were tinted dark enough to turn glass into mirrors. The lead vehicle slowed as it approached the main gate, tires crunching over gravel. Nothing about their arrival had been broadcast over comms. No notice from command. No announcement on the base PA. First Lieutenant Lena Myles stood at her post with the same unchanging stance she'd held since 06:00. Her uniform was immaculate again. Even the mud from yesterday had vanished without trace. She raised the scanner as the lead vehicle pulled up, her expression neutral, voice steady. But the window didn't roll down. Instead, the engine turned off. Behind the gate, a pair of maintenance NCOs paused, watching. 50 yards down, a cluster of security personnel near the fence line went still. From the nearby admin building, Captain Daltrey emerged with 2 other officers, squinting toward the commotion like men expecting trouble they hadn't been briefed on. The driver stepped out first, tall, square-jawed, close-cropped hair, tactical build. He walked around the vehicle, opened the rear passenger door, and stood back. Colonel Thomas Riker exited slowly, his boots hitting the ground with quiet finality. His face was as familiar as it was feared, years in special operations, deployed in Fallujah, Ramadi, Kandahar. His chest had seen more combat patches than most officers had seen deployments. Nobody on base expected him to appear here, and certainly not at the gate. Riker didn't glance at the security cameras. He didn't acknowledge Daltrey or the cluster of curious personnel gathering along the curb. He walked forward, alone, until he stood exactly 3 paces from Lena. She didn't move, not even a blink. Riker stopped, straightened his spine, raised his right hand to the brim of his patrol cap. His salute was slow, precise, perfect. Lena returned it without delay, palm slicing the air in a motion trained, not taught. She held it until he lowered his hand. At 16:08 or 8 minutes past 4 p.m., the base froze. Daltrey's step faltered. The others behind him fell completely silent. A tech sergeant near the motor pool turned away from a clipboard, eyes wide. A lieutenant near the PX dropped his water bottle. Riker didn't speak for another full second. Then he said her name. Not Myles, not Lieutenant. He called her Lena, clear and deliberate. No rank, no need for one. She gave a small nod, barely perceptible, then stepped back and gestured toward the gate controls. Riker signaled the convoy forward. Each vehicle passed through in total silence. No engine revs, no radio chatter. His team in the trailing SUV scanned the perimeter without speaking, eyes always moving, posture casual but alert, the kind of alert that never really turns off. Once inside, the SUVs turned toward the command building. Colonel Riker didn't follow immediately. He stood at the edge of the gate for another moment, as if considering something. Then he turned to Lena again. His voice dropped low. "Well done." That was all he said. He walked away. Lena didn't move for a full 15 seconds after he left. When she finally turned back to the booth, Captain Daltrey was still watching from the admin steps. He looked like someone trying to solve a riddle written in a language he didn't know existed. His jaw had clenched. His posture had changed. For the first time since her assignment began, he didn't smirk. At 16:14 or 14 past 4 p.m., the entire rhythm of the base shifted. Personnel stood straighter. Conversations lowered to murmurs. Training groups paused mid-drill. Everyone felt the same thing, even if they couldn't name it. Something had changed. Nobody knew why Colonel Riker saluted the gate girl. But now, everyone was suddenly interested in who she really was. At 07:45 or 7:45 a.m., the command conference room inside Laughlin Air Force Base was full. Every senior officer, from squadron leads to the deputy base commander, sat around the long oak table, uniforms pressed, tablets open. Some had already heard the rumors. Most didn't believe them. Lieutenant Lena Myles stood at the far end of the room, her posture straight, face composed. Colonel Thomas Riker entered with 2 members of his Special Operations Inspection Unit. He didn't waste time on greetings. He gave one nod, then faced the room. As of this morning, Operation Glass Veil is complete. He glanced at Lena. Lieutenant Myles will present her findings. The shift in the room was subtle but immediate. Several officers straightened. One captain frowned, not sure if he'd misheard. A major glanced at the door, as if looking for the real speaker. Lena stepped forward. She carried a slim tablet, tapped the screen once, and began without hesitation. As assigned by Air Combat Command, I conducted a 30-day covert audit of base-level readiness, protocol adherence, and threat vulnerability. My cover was full immersion at perimeter entry. Observation began at 06:00 on the 23rd of last month and concluded at 18:00 yesterday. No one interrupted. The room had gone silent. I logged 112 procedural violations, 78 instances of personnel misconduct, and 17 structural vulnerabilities. Of those, 9 pose immediate risks to perimeter integrity or internal response timing. She tapped the tablet again. A projection appeared on the wall behind her, highlighting the northwest fencing in red. The camera blind spot between sectors 3 and 4 remains unresolved after 2 work orders and 5 maintenance flags. At night, illumination is inconsistent. During drills, that section is passed without visual confirmation from roving patrols. Her voice remained calm, measured. She never glanced at anyone directly. I documented 10 security drills over the course of 3 weeks. In 8 of those, response teams exceeded acceptable margin by more than 90 seconds. In 2, they failed to secure the North Quad in the event of a simulated breach. No reprimands were recorded. She tapped again. Time-stamped footage played in silence. Captain Sean Daltrey shifted in his chair. No one looked at him. Regarding personnel behavior, 37 individuals failed to salute, acknowledge, or verify senior presence at points of entry. Of those, 21 hold ranks of E5 or higher. This reflects a breakdown in discipline and command presence at daily operational levels. She continued without pause. Repeated dismissal of gate personnel, including public mockery by senior staff, created a culture of passive insubordination. This led directly to 3 protocol lapses. In one case, a contractor's vehicle was misidentified due to inattentive badge scanning of a mall. In another, a Humvee left base without secondary log confirmation. The report displayed timestamps and still frames of both events. At 07:59 or 1 minute before 8 a.m., the only sound in the room was the hum of the air system. Lena paused. The final and most critical observation is a cognitive bias present across the chain of command. Individuals perceived to hold low-value positions are systemically disregarded, even when fulfilling active security roles. This bias is not procedural. It is cultural. It increases risk, diminishes morale, and encourages negligence. She tapped the screen once more. A summary table replaced the map. That concludes my findings. All evidence, supporting data, and recommendations are uploaded and transmitted to Air Combat Command. Colonel Riker spoke next. Lieutenant Myles is a former A-10C pilot. 2 deployments, 9 combat sorties, transferred to Tactical Operations Command after injury recovery. She holds dual certification in SIGINT and internal threat analysis. He let the silence settle. She was not here by mistake. She was here to watch you work when you thought no one important was watching. She saw everything, and she didn't need rank to do it. By 11:10 or 10 minutes past 11 a.m., the conference room had emptied, but the air still held its weight. The officers who had once passed by Lena without a glance now looked at her with a mix of shame and unease. None of them spoke as she exited the room with the same even stride she'd shown since her first morning at the gate. The hallway fell quiet as she passed. Outside, near the command wing steps, Captain Daltrey waited. His uniform was sharp, but his posture had lost its edge. He stepped forward, hesitated, then spoke in a voice that lacked its usual confidence. He said he hadn't known, said he hadn't meant it, said he was sorry. Lena didn't change expression. She met his eyes without emotion. She told him his behavior hadn't surprised her. It had simply been part of the data she was there to collect. That was all. No accusation, no anger, just a statement of fact. Daltrey stood there in silence, unsure of what to do with a truth that didn't need punishment to cut deep. At 13:00 or 1 o'clock p.m., the base commander held a formal meeting with staff leadership. He acknowledged the findings. He admitted the culture of disregard. He made no excuses. Standing before them, he promised reform, not out of pressure, but out of responsibility. Lena stood at the back of the room, watching, not reacting. She would not be staying to see the changes. That wasn't her role. By 15:45 or 3:45 p.m., her quarters were cleared. The drawer was empty. The encrypted devices had been collected and locked in a black case marked for command delivery. She wore her true uniform now. Different insignia. Different patch on her shoulder. Same quiet presence. At 16:00, Colonel Riker met her at the convoy. He didn't speak, just nodded once. She nodded back. As the SUV door closed behind her, the airbase behind them carried on. Drills resumed. Orders barked. Systems moved. But something had shifted. Not just in procedure, in posture, in presence. A stillness where there had once been smugness. A pause where there had been dismissal. And in that silence, something had finally started to correct itself. At 06:00 or 6 o'clock in the morning, First Lieutenant Lena Myles returned to the gate for one final watch. The post looked the same, but the energy was different. Officers walking in saluted her first. Enlisted personnel greeted her with quiet respect. Even the air felt less heavy. Captain Daltrey approached just after 07:10 or 10 after 7 a.m. His apology was simple this time. No excuses. Just regret. Lena accepted it with a nod. Then she reminded him that this had never been about one man. Culture isn't loud. It's quiet. It shows in habits, not headlines. That's where the real threat lives. At 08:00, a Black Hawk lifted from the airfield. Lena climbed in without ceremony, gear packed, headset clipped on. As they gained altitude, she looked down at the base. The same fences, the same roads, but it wasn't the structures that mattered. Security isn't measured in locks or walls. It's measured in how we treat the people who stand watch when no one's looking. Lena turned from the window, not angry, just ready. And the base below, for the first time in a long time, was ready too.